When I was 4, my parents worked long hours at a restaurant. They left my brother to babysit me until 10 to 10:30 p.m. at night. He's 8 years older than me, so 12 years old at the time. Every night when my parents come home, they'll ring the bell and I'll run to greet them at the door with my brother. It was a familiar, comforting routine in our small, 2-story house. The sound of the doorbell, the rush of anticipation, the warm embrace of my parents. It was a simple joy, a nightly ritual that marked the end of a long day, and the beginning of bedtime stories and milk. My brother, Michael, was a constant presence in my young life, a towering figure of strength and authority in my tiny world. He'd patiently endure my endless questions, build elaborate Lego castles with me, and shield me from the occasional childhood scrape. He was my protector, my confidant, and the only reason I wasn't completely terrified of the dark. Then, one ordinary night, everything changed. The doorbell rang, as usual. I was already halfway down the stairs, my little legs pumping with excitement, ready to greet Mom and Dad. But when I flung open the door, the usual warm smiles and welcoming hugs were replaced by 4 menacing figures, their faces obscured by the dim porch light. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. These weren't my parents. These were strangers, men with hard, unfamiliar eyes and something cold and metallic glinting in their hands. Guns. Fear, cold and sharp, sliced through my innocent world. Michael, usually composed and confident, stood frozen beside me, his face as white as the wall behind him. "Go downstairs," one of the men barked, his voice rough and gravelly. "Now." We shuffled down the stairs, a silent, terrified procession. The house, once a haven of comfort, was now a prison. They herded us into the living room, the familiar glow of the television screen a stark contrast to the panic rising in my chest. One of the men stayed with us, his gun never straying far from my brother and me. The other 3 disappeared upstairs, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the house like thunder. I felt a strange mix of terror and curiosity. My eyes darted towards Michael, who seemed to be trying to project an air of nonchalance, but his trembling hands betrayed his true fear. Then, I noticed the Nintendo cords. My eyes widened. My brother's wrists were bound, the familiar red and gray cords cutting into his skin. I reached out, my small hand instinctively tugging at the rope around his wrist. It wasn't out of malice or a desire to free him. It was pure curiosity, a childish fascination with the unfamiliar. The man with the gun snapped, his voice like a whip. "Stop it!" The gun felt like it was pressed against my forehead, so close that I could feel the cold metal. I recoiled, my little body trembling. I didn't understand why he was so angry, but I knew that whatever this strange game was, it was dangerous. I didn't dare to touch the cords again. Minutes ticked by, each one an eternity. The silence was broken only by the distant sounds of the intruders upstairs and the muffled whimpers that I could hear rising from my brother's throat. The man with the gun seemed to relax a little, but his eyes never left us. Then, the sounds from upstairs stopped. The intruders emerged, their faces grim and satisfied. They swiftly bound Michael and me to a wooden beam in the basement, their movements quick and practiced. The world faded to a blur of fear and confusion. I remember the coldness of the basement floor, the rough texture of the ropes biting into my skin, and the muffled sobs that escaped my brother's lips. I don't know how long we were there, tied up like helpless puppets. Time seemed to lose all meaning. But then, I felt a sudden jerk. My brother was struggling, wiggling his bound arms. I watched in stunned silence as he managed to work his way free from the ropes, his face contorted with effort and pain. In the distance, I heard the familiar sound of the doorbell. My heart leapt. It was my parents. Michael, despite his own discomfort, helped me free myself from the bindings. Then, together, we stumbled up the stairs, bursting into the living room just as my parents rushed in, their faces etched with concern and relief. The scene that followed was a whirlwind of confusion and chaos. My parents were frantic, their eyes scanning our bodies for injuries, their voices a torrent of worried questions. The police were called, neighbors gathered, and the house, once a symbol of safety, was now a crime scene. The intruders had gotten away with some jewelry and a camcorder, a paltry haul for the terror they had inflicted. The police investigation was long and drawn out, a series of interviews and interrogations that felt like reopening old wounds. The aftermath of that night left a deep scar on my childhood. The innocence of my early years was shattered, replaced by a lingering sense of fear and vulnerability. I couldn't shake the images of the intruders, their faces, their guns. My nights were haunted by nightmares, the cold basement a recurring symbol of terror. But through it all, my bond with Michael was strengthened. He was my hero, the older brother who had faced unimaginable fear and emerged to protect me. His strength, his courage, became a beacon in the darkness. Years have passed since that night. The house is different now, a new home with new memories. The scars of that night are still there, but they are slowly fading. The fear is still there, a quiet hum in the back of my mind, but it no longer controls me. I learned that night that the world can be a dangerous place, that even the most familiar routines can be shattered in an instant. But I also learned the power of resilience, the strength of human connection, and the enduring love of family. My brother Michael became a symbol of that resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. The memory of that night serves as a constant reminder of the importance of family, of the need to cherish every moment, and of the unwavering strength found in the love of a brother. It's a story that I will carry with me always, a story that shaped the person I am today. Our house was broken into when I was a kid. We were on vacation at the time, a much-needed escape to the beach after a particularly grueling stretch from my dad's business. We were supposed to be enjoying the salty air and the sound of crashing waves, but instead, a frantic phone call from the neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, shattered the illusion of carefree bliss. Her voice, shaky with a mix of concern and alarm, relayed the news that something was amiss at our house. We packed up in a whirlwind of panicked confusion, the vacation suddenly feeling like a cruel joke. The drive home was a blur, punctuated by my mother's tearful whispers and my father's grim silence. Each mile brought us closer to the unknown, the reality of what we might find sinking in with each passing moment. The sight that greeted us upon arriving home will forever be etched in my memory. The front door, usually a welcoming entry point to our cozy home, was splintered and askew, a gaping wound in the heart of our family. The once manicured lawn was trampled, a testament to hurried and invasive footsteps. Inside, the house was ravaged. It wasn't just a mess, it was a scene of calculated chaos, a battlefield where our sense of security had been brutally overturned. Drawers were ripped open, their contents strewn across the floors. Clothes were tossed like discarded confetti, furniture overturned, and every surface dusted with the residue of hurried hands. My father's home office, a gleaming testament to his hard work and entrepreneurial spirit just weeks prior, was the epicenter of the devastation. The new Windows 95 computers, the pride and joy of his recent upgrade, were gone, along with a mountain of other office equipment that, in the eyes of the thieves, likely represented a 90s gold mine. I remember the feeling of utter vulnerability, the sudden realization that our sanctuary, our safe haven, had been violated, turned inside out by unknown hands. The police arrived, their presence a jarring contrast to the quiet suburban street. The officers, with their practiced detachment, quickly began their investigation. Dusting for fingerprints, taking inventory of the stolen goods, their words like a cold shower. "Looks like a professional job. Probably 5 or 6 of them." The news that our home had been targeted by seasoned criminals was both terrifying and unsettling. Later, the officers revealed more chilling details. They had heard the intrusion on their police scanner, the call that Mrs. Henderson, our new neighbor, had made. The thieves, alerted to their presence, had seemingly vanished as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a lingering sense of dread. We learned that they had probably been watching us, studying our routines, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The police confirmed this with the amount of time they took to remove what they wanted. The most disturbing discovery, the one that continued to haunt me even 20 years later, was the kitchen knives scattered throughout our bedrooms. These weren't just random objects, they were weapons, deliberate choices placed strategically in various rooms. The police confirmed our suspicions, suggesting that they were likely intended to be used as a deterrent, or a potential weapon against anyone who might have been home. The thought of those knives, of the unknown individuals who placed them there, who had been watching our house, who intended to harm us, sent shivers down my spine. In the aftermath of the break-in, our lives were irrevocably changed. The sense of security we once felt within our own home was shattered, replaced with a constant undercurrent of anxiety. Every creak of the house, every unfamiliar sound, became amplified, a potential sign of danger. We replaced the broken locks, installed a security system, and felt the uncomfortable need to always be vigilant, to scan our surroundings, to anticipate the unexpected. My own room, once a haven of childhood innocence, became a place of unease, a space where the image of those knives lingered in the corners of my mind. The incident instilled a deep sense of fear in me, a fear that transcended the immediate loss of material possessions. It was a visceral fear of the unknown, of the individuals who had dared to violate our space, who had invaded our lives in such a calculated and malicious way. Even though the police did the best they could to reassure us that this was a rare event in our neighborhood, nothing could fully erase the imprint of that night. The break-in was a watershed moment in our family's history. My father, a man of unwavering strength and determination, seemed shaken. He worked tirelessly to rebuild his business, replacing the stolen computers, but the incident also marked a change in his demeanor. He became more cautious, more protective, always scanning the environment, a reflection of the anxieties that had taken root within him. My mother, always the emotional anchor of our family, was visibly shaken. The violation of our home had chipped away at the foundation of her sense of safety. She became more protective of us, her anxieties finding expression in countless worried questions and endless reminders to lock the doors and windows. I, the youngest of the family, was perhaps the most vulnerable. The images of the ransacked house, the knives found in my bedroom, the understanding that we had been targeted, haunted my sleep. I developed an acute awareness of shadows, a heightened sensitivity to noise, a pervasive sense of unease. The safety and serenity I once associated with home were replaced with a persistent feeling of vulnerability. Years have passed, and the physical scars of the break-in have healed. The house has been repaired, the locks replaced, and a sense of normalcy has returned to our lives. But the psychological scars remain. The incident etched itself into the fabric of our collective memory, a painful reminder of our fragility and vulnerability. My dad's business thrived again, a testament to his resilience and dedication. But the incident taught him the importance of security, and it became a major factor in the decisions he made as a business leader. My mom, too, found a way to navigate her fears, rediscovering a sense of control in the careful way she built a new, more fortified sense of home. But for me, the impact of that night has lingered. Even 20 years later, the images of the ransacked house, the presence of the knives, the realization that we had been watched, continue to surface in my dreams and thoughts. I am eternally grateful that no one was home that night, but I can't shake the feeling that they were waiting, that they knew we had a set schedule. The incident forever changed my perspective on safety and security. The simple act of closing and locking a door now carries with it a weight that it never had before. It's a constant reminder that our homes, the places we consider our havens, are not always as secure as we believe them to be. It's a stark reminder of the very real dangers that exist in the world, dangers that can shatter the illusion of safety and security in an instant. The memory of that night stays with me, a sentinel that keeps me vigilant, a reminder that life's tranquility can be fragile, and that we are always ultimately responsible for our own safety and security, regardless of where we are or who we are with. One night about 7 years ago, just moved into my new home. The neighborhood was a good place, no major crime. It was a quiet, tree-lined street with well-kept lawns and friendly neighbors who waved as they passed by. I'd always dreamt of owning my own house, a place where I could finally feel settled and at peace. The house itself was modest, a comfortable two-story with a spacious backyard that I envisioned filling with flowers and the laughter of friends. Moving in had been a whirlwind of boxes and unpacking, but I was thrilled to finally be putting down roots. The first few weeks were a blissful blur of unpacking, organizing, and getting to know my new surroundings. I spent my days exploring the neighborhood, discovering hidden parks and charming local shops. The nights were quiet, punctuated only by the chirping of crickets and the distant murmur of traffic. I felt a sense of tranquility I hadn't experienced in years. About 2 months after I moved in, my peaceful existence was shattered in the dead of night. It was around 2 a.m., and I was fast asleep, lost in a dreamless slumber. Suddenly, a deafening bang erupted from the front door, jolting me awake with a start. My heart hammered against my ribs as a raucous, redneck voice bellowed from the other side. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this a prank? A wrong address? Or something far more sinister? I was alone in the house, vulnerable and disoriented. My first instinct, fueled by adrenaline and a primal urge to protect myself, was to grab the sword I kept near my bed. It was a decorative piece, a memento from a trip to Japan, but in that moment, it felt like my only weapon. I sleep nude, a habit I developed over the years, and in the haze of panic, I didn't even register it. I flung myself out of bed, the cool night air hitting my skin as I stumbled towards the living room, sword held high. As I burst through the doorway, my voice, raw with terror and fury, erupted in a deafening yell. "Get the hell out of my house!" My eyes landed on the intruder, a hulking figure silhouetted against the faint light spilling from the porch. He was a large man, at least 300 pounds, with a beer belly that strained against his stained t-shirt. His eyes were wide, filled with a mix of surprise and fear at the sight of a naked man charging at him with a sword, bellowing like a banshee. The look on his face was indeed priceless, etched with the purest form of shock and terror. I saw his jaw drop, his eyes widen, and his whole body flinch as if struck by lightning. I charged forward, the adrenaline pumping through my veins, fueled by primal instinct and pure, unadulterated rage. He didn't hesitate. He stumbled backwards, tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape. He went down with a thud in the front yard, sprawling like a felled tree. I stood there for a moment, sword still raised, my heart pounding in my chest, until the sound of his scrambling escape faded into the distance. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, adrenaline, anger, and a touch of bewilderment. I quickly reached for a pair of sweatpants, and pulled them on before calling 911. I recounted the incident to the dispatcher, my voice still shaky, and waited for the police to arrive. The police arrived in a matter of minutes, their sirens echoing through the quiet neighborhood. They were a team of 2, young and alert, their faces etched with seriousness as they took in the scene. I explained what had happened, still slightly breathless from the encounter. They quickly took down my statement, and reassured me that they'd investigate. As it turned out, they'd already had someone in custody. It appeared the intruder had attempted to break into another house down the street, and the residents had called the police. I confirmed it was indeed the same man who had attempted to break into my house. Over the next few days, the police kept me updated on the situation. They told me the man had been identified and taken into custody. It turned out he was a local who had been struggling with a serious meth addiction. He'd been looking for an abandoned lot to crash in, and for some inexplicable reason, he'd chosen my street as his hunting ground. The incident left me shaken, but also with a sense of relief. I was safe, my home was secure, and the man responsible for the terrifying intrusion was behind bars. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, a strange mixture of fear and empowerment. I had faced my fear, defended my home, and survived. The following weeks and months were a gradual return to normalcy, but the memory of that night remained vivid in my mind. The bang on the door, the redneck yell, the sight of the intruder's face, and the surge of adrenaline that propelled me into action. It had been a terrifying experience, but it was also a defining moment. It taught me that even in a seemingly safe neighborhood, danger can lurk unexpectedly. It taught me the importance of being prepared, both physically and mentally, to face unexpected threats. And it taught me that sometimes, the most unexpected reactions can be the most effective. The experience also led me to make some changes in my life. I decided to take a self-defense class, learning basic martial arts and how to protect myself in various situations. I installed a security system in my home, adding a layer of protection and peace of mind. And I started to pay closer attention to my surroundings, always being aware of potential dangers. Years have passed since that night, and my life has returned to a state of tranquility. The neighborhood remains safe and friendly, and I've become more comfortable and secure in my home. Yet, the memory of that night never truly fades. It serves as a constant reminder that life is unpredictable, and that sometimes, the most ordinary moments can be shattered by the extraordinary. The incident also instilled in me a deep respect for the human capacity for resilience. It showed me that even in the face of fear and vulnerability, we can find the strength to protect ourselves and our loved ones. It's a lesson I carry with me to this day, a reminder that facing our fears, no matter how naked and unprepared we might feel, can sometimes be the most empowering act of all. And every once in a while, when I'm feeling particularly proud of myself, I'll chuckle remembering that priceless look on the face of a 300-pound meth-addicted intruder who stumbled out of my yard. A lasting testament to the unexpected hero within us all. In college, I had these neighbors upstairs that were a gay couple. Liam and Ethan, two of the kindest, most vibrant souls I'd ever met. They were always hosting parties, blasting 80s synth pop, and filling the hallway with the aroma of homemade cookies. They were the epitome of the fun, inclusive energy that college life is supposed to be about. One Friday night, a group of us, including Liam and Ethan, were coming back from the local dive bar, the Rusty Mug. We'd all had a few too many, the usual mix of laughter and boisterous conversations spilling out onto the sidewalk. Liam and Ethan headed up the stairs to their apartment, while I stumbled towards my own, a few doors down. Moments later, after fumbling with my keys and finally collapsing onto my bed, I heard it, a series of blood-curdling screams from upstairs. It wasn't the drunken ramblings of a Friday night reveler, it was raw, terrifying fear. My heart leaped into my throat. I scrambled to my feet and rushed to the window, peering out into the dimly lit street. That's when I saw him. A lanky figure in a faded blue jumpsuit, running as fast as his legs would carry him, sprinting past my window. My blood ran cold. Instinct took over. I ducked into my closet, the dark, cramped space suddenly feeling like a sanctuary. My hand, trembling slightly, dialed 911. "Hello, 911? There's a man. I think he's an intruder. He just ran past my window. He came from the apartment upstairs. My neighbors, they were screaming." My voice was shaky, barely a whisper. I relayed the details as quickly as I could, my eyes glued to the door, listening for any sign of the intruder returning. The dispatcher, calm and professional, guided me through the steps, reassuring me that help was on the way. While I waited, the silence in the hallway became deafening. Occasionally, I could hear muffled sounds from upstairs, but the screaming had stopped. It was replaced by a strange, unnerving quiet. Then I heard the soft thud of footsteps approaching my door. My breath hitched in my throat. Was he back? The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I heard a voice. "Police! Open up!" Relief washed over me in a wave. The cops were here. I quickly explained my situation to the officers, leading them to the source of the commotion, Liam and Ethan's apartment. Moments later, I heard a flurry of activity upstairs. Voices, sirens, and the rhythmic thump of footsteps. I peeked out of my door cautiously, watching as officers ushered Liam and Ethan out of their apartment, looking shaken and confused. They glanced at me, their eyes filled with a mixture of shock and gratitude. The aftermath was a whirlwind of confusion. The cops told me the intruder had been startled by Liam and Ethan's screams. Apparently, he hadn't had time to grab anything of value before he panicked and fled. Liam informed me that he had startled the intruder by screaming at the top of his lungs and charging at him. He was an amateur boxer, so he knew how to scare the living daylights out of someone. However, it was the fact that he had a friend with him, and they were both willing to take on this skinny guy that really spooked the guy. I felt a surge of relief that they were safe, but my relief was short-lived. In the midst of the chaos, the police discovered a stash of marijuana in the apartment, and a few open bottles of alcohol. Liam and Ethan were subsequently arrested for possession, and, in Ethan's case, underage drinking. I felt absolutely terrible. My call to the police, intended to help, had inadvertently led to their arrest. I knew they smoked weed occasionally, but I had never seen anything close to the amount they had in their apartment. I also knew Ethan had been drinking, and he was a couple of months short of being of the legal drinking age, but had never been caught until this night. I considered myself a friend of theirs, and I hadn't planned on ruining their lives. I didn't want them to think I was a terrible person, or that I had deliberately set them up. My heart ached for them, feeling both guilt and helplessness. Days turned into weeks, and the incident loomed over me. I avoided Liam and Ethan at first, avoiding eye contact when I saw them around campus, feeling like I had betrayed them. My attempts to apologize were brushed off, their faces revealing a combination of hurt and anger. It seemed as though my actions had created a rift between us, a chasm of misunderstanding and distrust. Later that month, Liam and Ethan had their court dates. Thankfully, the charges were dropped following a plea bargain, but their experience still had a profound impact on their lives. The judge let them off with a warning, however he said if they were ever caught again, they would be looking at jail time. Liam and Ethan finally confronted me about the incident, and after they calmed down, I explained that I was truly sorry for what happened. I told them that I had been scared, and I wanted to protect them. They didn't want to hear it. Their anger, understandable considering the circumstances, eventually subsided. They said that they knew I hadn't meant to cause them trouble. But they told me that I was lucky that they were still talking to me. The experience was a harsh lesson in the unintended consequences of our actions. It taught me the importance of careful consideration before acting, especially in moments of panic and fear. It also taught me that sometimes, even when our intentions are good, the outcome can be devastating. Over time, our relationship healed. Liam and Ethan eventually forgave me, understanding that I had acted out of concern for their safety. We reconnected slowly, cautiously, the laughter and camaraderie eventually returning to our little college bubble. However, the memory of that terrifying night, of the screaming, the running figure, and its unfortunate aftermath, remained etched in my mind. It served as a constant reminder of the fragility of trust, the unexpected consequences of our choices, and the importance of empathy and understanding in the face of uncertainty. The incident also taught me the importance of respecting others' choices, even when I didn't necessarily agree with them. I learned that everyone has secrets, and we should all be respectful of the way people choose to live their lives. I also learned that sometimes, the best thing we can do is to be there for others, even if it means swallowing our own discomfort or fear. It was a tough lesson to learn, but I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. The friendship I forged with Liam and Ethan, tested by fire and forged in understanding, became one of the most valuable relationships of my college years. And though the memory of that night still lingers, it no longer fills me with guilt and regret, but rather with a renewed appreciation for the complex tapestry of human relationships and the delicate balance between our actions and their consequences. I've done my fair share of house invasions. It's a job like any other: find a place, wait for the right time, and take whatever's inside. Easy. I've been watching this house near the lake for weeks. It was perfect, secluded, always quiet, no sign of life. A family of 4 lived there, but their routine was predictable. The father worked long hours, the mother took the kids out during the day, and the house was empty by nightfall. No one would miss what I was about to take. The house was a classic lakeside dwelling, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and large windows overlooking the shimmering water. It always seemed to be bathed in a soft, ethereal light, even at night. I'd parked my beat-up pickup a good distance away, careful not to attract any unwanted attention. My heart was calm, my mind focused. This was just another job, another score. I'd scoped out the neighborhood, memorized the family's routine, picked my moment. Everything was in place for a clean in-and-out operation. But when I stepped inside that night, it was different. The air felt thick. Too still. There was an eerie silence that I couldn't shake. It wasn't like any of the other places I'd broken into. Those houses had their own rhythms, the hum of appliances, the creak of old floorboards, the occasional distant noise of traffic. This house was too quiet. No sounds from the kitchen, no ticking clock, nothing. My heart skipped a beat, a fleeting surge of unease, but I forced myself to keep moving. I was a professional. I didn't let fear cloud my judgment. I found the back door unlocked, which was strange in itself. A house this remote, with no signs of activity for days, it should have been locked up tight. But I wasn't about to pass up an opportunity. I stepped inside, careful not to make a sound. The darkness was deeper here, thicker than it should be for a house with large windows. I flipped on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the oppressive stillness. The house felt almost frozen in time. Every room was neat. Too neat. It was as if the family had just left, but everything was in place. It was unsettling, like walking into a meticulously curated museum exhibit instead of a lived-in home. I moved through the house slowly, checking every room, every drawer. But something was off. It wasn't just the silence, it was the way the house felt. Like it was holding its breath, waiting. I entered the living room and stopped cold. A large portrait hung on the wall, a family of 4, looking perfectly happy. The father, a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, stood beside his wife, who had a warmth in her features that radiated even from the canvas. Beside them were 2 children, a boy and a girl, both with bright smiles that should have been endearing, but felt off. There was something wrong with it. The children's faces were missing. Instead of their faces, there were blank spaces, like someone had erased them with a meticulous hand. I stared at the portrait for too long, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I shook it off. It was just a weird painting, probably something the family had bought on a whim, or inherited from a long-lost relative. But the longer I looked at it, the more uncomfortable I felt. I could have sworn the blank spots were shifting, the outlines of the children's faces twitching, as if trying to form, like a phantom limb struggling to regain its lost shape. I pulled myself away from the painting and tried to focus. I needed to get what I came for. Cash, jewelry, anything of value. But as I moved deeper into the house, the unease grew. The children's toys were scattered in the hallway, a few brightly colored blocks and stuffed animals misplaced, but the place was still too clean. No sign of life. Not even a pet. I opened the door to one of the bedrooms. Nothing. The beds were neatly made, the closet empty except for a few pieces of clothing. I moved to the next room, the kids' room. The beds were made, identical twin comforters pulled taut. The shelves were lined with stuffed animals and books, a testament to a childhood filled with imagination and wonder. But something was wrong with the air in there. It was cold, unnaturally cold. Like the temperature had dropped by 10 degrees since I'd entered. That's when I saw it, another portrait, hanging on the wall. This one was of the 2 kids, individually this time. But instead of smiling faces, their faces were smeared. Distorted, as though someone had dragged their fingers through wet paint, leaving a chaotic blend of colors and textures. I leaned closer, my heart racing. The faces moved. The eyes shifted in unnatural ways, the mouth stretching, twisting into expressions of pain and horror that were impossible to render in paint. I stumbled back, my chest tightening, trying to tell myself it was just a trick of the light or my mind playing games. But the longer I stared at the portrait, the more the children's faces twisted, becoming something monstrous. Their features contorted into grotesque shapes, their eyes glowing with an unnerving luminescence, like embers in the darkness. I couldn't tear my eyes away, and I felt the air growing thicker around me, almost suffocating. The room seemed to close in, and I heard something, a low, guttural whisper that echoed through the walls. It was like it was coming from the painting itself, a voice devoid of warmth, carrying a chilling sense of age and despair. "Leave, now!" I didn't wait to find out what it meant. I turned to run, but as I did, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang that reverberated through the house. The house shuddered. The walls groaned, as if protesting my intrusion. My heart pounded in my chest as I rushed back down the hall, but when I reached the stairs, I saw something I'll never forget. The family portrait in the living room had changed. The faces of the father and mother were gone, erased. Only the blank spaces remained where they once were, staring back at me with a hollow emptiness. I froze, staring at the empty spaces. My breathing was erratic, panicked. I could feel eyes on me, no, not just eyes. Something was watching me, waiting. The shuffling sound from upstairs started again, but this time it wasn't faint. It was loud, like footsteps following me, getting closer. But no one was there. I could hear them, feel them, but when I turned around, there was nothing. Just the oppressive silence of the house, the darkness holding its breath. I ran. I didn't care about the loot anymore. I couldn't think. The house was alive, and I was its prey. My footsteps were louder than the whispers now, a frantic drumbeat echoing through the empty rooms. They were following me, surrounding me, their presence a palpable weight in the air. When I finally reached the back door, it wouldn't open. I yanked on the handle, but it was stuck, locked from the inside. I was trapped. A wave of despair washed over me, cold and sharp. I turned and heard it again, the sound of footsteps. This time, they were right behind me. I spun around, expecting to see someone, but there was only darkness. Only the whispering, louder now, carrying a threat I couldn't ignore, and something else. The sound of breathing, too close to my ear, a ragged, shallow inhale that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled back, crashing into the wall. The house had changed. The walls weren't just walls anymore. They shifted, bending in unnatural angles, the wood groaning under unseen pressure. The air felt thick with dread, suffocating me, pressing down on my chest like a physical weight. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the family portrait on the wall again. But this time, it was different. The spaces where the faces had been were filled with my face. I was looking at myself, staring back at me, but the eyes weren't mine. They were empty, black, devoid of life. The same unnerving luminescence as the children's eyes in the other portrait. And then I felt it. A chilling touch on my cheek, cold and wet. The whispers were right there, in my ear. "Welcome home." I woke up in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic stinging my nostrils. My body ached, my head throbbed, and my mind was a swirling vortex of fragmented memories and horrifying images. I couldn't recall how I got here, how I escaped that house of horrors. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive, that I had suffered a severe concussion and a possible bout of hypothermia. They said I had been found unconscious near the lake, delirious and muttering about a house and children and whispers. I never went back to that house near the lake. I never spoke of what I saw, what I felt. The memory of the blank spaces, the shifting faces, the suffocating whispers, it haunts my every waking moment. The job, the easy score, it had become a nightmare.